Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. It was December 15th when I came across this article in the New York Times. It actually was in my email that morning. Eli Saslow, photographs included from Aaron Schaff, and the photographs really help tell the story. I have to remind you that. I will give this to you as a gift link in today's show notes at ronshowatl.com. It tells the story of Jaime Cachua, along with his wife Jennifer and son Julian, and all of them face the very stark reality that father Jaime, who locally to many is known by Jamie, could be deported. This story really grabbed at me because, A, it's in Georgia. I'm from Georgia, grew up in Georgia. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene country. Their story centers around the city of Rome, some hour and a half, 90 minutes or so from Atlanta, Georgia, a fairly large town, city size of about 40,000 in a small metropolitan area surrounded by a lot of rural northwest Georgia. I've mentioned this before. My ex-husband's family hail from south of Rome. I'm very familiar with this district. I'm also very familiar with the xenophobic language that comes out of the mouth of Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congressional representative of that part of Georgia, who is a huge fan of Donald Trump, as is a lot of the folks around the folks that we are talking about who are the centerpiece of this New York Times story, Jaime and Jennifer and their son Julian. Jennifer is joining me, and I'm glad I get to speak with you. Thank you so much for giving me the time. Am I saying Julian's name right, or is that a soft J?
Oh, no, that's right.
Okay.
We call him predominantly Julian, and it's not just Julian. You know, we have 4 children.
Okay, go on. Give me the other 3.
We have Adeline and Jackson and Amelia as well.
All right, good deal. So we know what you guys do in your spare time. Enough about that. I'm just kidding. But I mean, that only exacerbates, what's on the line in this situation. As I was reading through this story, I couldn't help but be gripped by the sort of isolation that your husband Jaime must feel. And obviously you are attuned to it as well. I mean, you share a bed with him. You literally can feel his heartbeat. You can feel him breathing at night when you sleep. And there comes a symbiosis in that is unspoken and unexplainable, but I get it. Knowing that so many folks in your periphery, your church goers, your coworkers, his coworkers, your family, your very father who voted for Donald Trump, probably twice, if I remember correctly in the article, and now suddenly realizes, oh my God, this isn't just about the immigrant he and they don't know who's coming across the border, who could be criminals, yada, yada, yada. But this has a very real impact on somebody that is very real, very tangible to them, someone that they know, someone that they've worked with and interact with and have hugged and shook hands with over 3+ decades. Being the wife of someone who is essentially a DACA resident of this country who has been here since, 10 months old, 11 months old, who doesn't know anything but Rome, Georgia, and the United States of America. Talk to me about the learning curve for you. You've been together, about 5 years? What have you learned about his plight and the plight of so many others like him in that amount of time?
Oh, man. So, I'll start and preface it with the fact that, before I learned about how difficult the process is just to become a citizen and really learned my husband's story, I once was a supporter of Trump myself, growing up in this region. I grew up, in a conservative family, and that was my ideals. Those were, that's what I believed in. And then when Jaime and I started dating and I learned about his, how he has DACA and the fact, I was like, oh, okay, well, what's your path to citizenship like? And just learning more about it and how complicated it really is, asking those questions of well, how long will it take for you to become a citizen? How much money is it going to cost? What about your family? And, it really opened my eyes to the fact that it's so just insanely expensive so time consuming and really just so unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because like you mentioned my father, my dad and everything, Sky, he is kind of where I was, just kind of like ignorant to it all. And that's not really the fact of him meaning to be ignorant, I would say. But one of the things I will tell people always, I feel like knowledge is based off of necessity. And, he's never had the reason to feel it was necessary to learn about immigration policies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until I had necessary reasons to learn about it with Jaime that I was like, oh, wow, this is really, really hard.
Complicated.
This is super complicated. And and like asking Jaime even like, what about your grandparents? How long did it take for your grandfather to get his green card? And he's like, oh, 15 years. I'm like, what? This is crazy. Like, there's no reason why it should take so long, and then for my husband too, whenever we started walking down this path, I was like, at first I was like, oh, okay, well, like, this is going to be simple. It's just going to be, we're married. Like, this shouldn't be that difficult, and then I'm realizing, like, it's not easy. It's everything but. And then the people around us, they make comments. They're like, oh, well, same thing. Like, oh, you're married. Like, it should be easy, right? I'm like, no, it's everything but.
Yeah.
And we can spend all of this money, thousands and thousands of dollars, and have together this perfect packet that says, my husband is a stand-up citizen and he does all, not citizen, a stand-up person. And he's like the model person. This is the kind of person that you'd want to be a citizen. And if it lands into the hands of a USCI agent that's like, never mind. No, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
They can send it all back to us and we can be in a waiting game all over again. And so it's one of those things where it's just like, there's so many unknown factors in the immigration process. It's not cut and dry. And that was one of the biggest things I had to learn is like, it's not easy. It's not an overnight process. It's not something that can be corrected and fixed in just a month or two or even a year. Like, you have people waiting decades to even have the hopes of become a, American citizen. And the whole time they have no legal rights to certain things. And then it's even harder for me to look at somebody like my husband, who I feel like does so many things right. It wasn't like he made the choice to come here as a child. And ever since he could, as soon as DACA was passed, my husband applied for DACA and has been paying his taxes every year and just being like the best that he can, like never getting in any trouble. And, he has a family and he does all these wonderful things. And it's like, why is it so hard for somebody who's doing it all right to become a citizen? Like, all they want to do is contribute.
Yeah. So with the 2024 election cycle in full broil and with talk of an immigration deal, a bipartisan deal being negotiated on, and all it took was a Senate vote and then it would land on President Biden's desk, and there had to be some glimmer of hope there. Then you have the Laken Riley death in Athens, Georgia, which becomes salacious, fervent, divisive headlines back and forth throughout the state of Georgia and throughout the country. And you have, again, your congressional representative, Marjorie Taylor Greene, yelling, say her name at Biden's State of the Union speech, and the hateful rhetoric. Just take me to those conversations when you're seated at the dining room table or you're watching the news and this stuff is splashed, before your very eyes, and the sort of thoughts and stomach churning that goes on.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. It's one of those things. It's like, it's just so much mass propaganda to just make people afraid. They're pushing the agenda that it feels like that all people who are illegal are criminals and evil and doing terrible things. And it's like, that's not the case. Just on my own Facebook feed the other day, I had somebody that put something up about, like, oh, can't wait till Trump takes office on the 20th, because it was something about a Hispanic man that had committed a crime or whatever. And they, like, they just were like, oh, can't wait till he can take care of all the criminals, like, this is why he needs to get rid of them. And I'm like, it's not all of them. That's my thing that kills me, is like, we're focusing so much on this one subgroup, but the problem is like, there's bad people everywhere.
Yeah.
like every socioeconomic class, every racial group.
Yep.
It does not matter where you derive from. There are bad people everywhere.
As a matter of
So to
fact,
push,
I was going to point out that the article came out yesterday, or January 8th, I should say. Newsweek, the headline, Migrants Committing Fewer Crimes Than Americans in Georgia. This is a story from Dan Gooding, where Georgia, he announced that Georgia had started sharing its data on illegal immigrant crime in the state, and it shows that non-citizens are committing crimes at a lower rate than their American counterparts. But, facts,
y-
logics be damned.
well, yeah, and that's the thing that kills me is that people don't realize is that a majority of them, they just want to be a part of our system. They just want to be here and they want to have contribute to our economy and have thriving families and feel safe. And that's all they care about. They don't want to commit horrible things and do, they're not all part of the cartel or running drugs or, part of gangs. That's not how yeah, there are some. But there's also people like that who, like I said, belong to every socioeconomic group, belong to every race or religion. Like there's people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So like to be just putting the Hispanic population or Latin American population under a microscope and saying, hey, you're all terrible if you are here illegally. That's not accurate,
What is your reaction when you hear a politician say the very fact that they are here and not here legally makes them a criminal?
It's frustrating because I get it. Like it's written in law that it is a law and it is illegal. And I understand that. But my thing of it is too, is if we want people to be able to immigrate legally, it needs to be more accessible.
Mm.
I don't feel like it's one of those things that everybody that could contribute, that if they were given the opportunity, these people could thrive and they could contribute mass amounts financially to our economics and everything. They can't afford to even step their foot into it, because they're coming from maybe lower socioeconomic classes and maybe they're trying to start a life here and trying to build up, and they're not asking for handouts, but they're just asking for an opportunity, right? And so why is it that we can't just allow them the opportunity, make it more accessible for these people? And or people like my husband who were brought here as a child, and even my husband's case is even weird in itself because my husband's family didn't technically come over illegal. Like his grandfather came over legally and then petitioned for all of his family, but because of a clerical error, whenever it came down to the receipt from USCIS, my husband wasn't put on it. So my husband is viewed as a illegal alien because of a clerical error. And there's a whole process that you could go through recapturing it and doing this and doing that. But again, it's not concrete and it may not work. And so it's how many other people who maybe did come over, families did come over legally, or they did do it right, and maybe somebody just messed up the paperwork. So it's just frustrating because it's I don't know. Like I said, I feel like these people, they just want an opportunity. And if we're so just bent on the fact that they came over illegal and that wasn't okay, I get it, but how do we make that more accessible for them? How do we make it to where they can maybe afford it better, or they can, have a better fast track? Because that's the other thing. Nobody wants to sit waiting for 2 decades to ever get a green card. That is absurd.
It's not feasible. It's not. It's not worth the time and the effort to put into it. We are on with Jennifer Kachua, who is married to 33-year-old Jaime Kachua, who is a DACA recipient who lives here in the state of Georgia, Rome, Georgia, and faces the potential that a second Trump presidency means he may have to leave the country and his wife and their 4 children behind for an indeterminate amount of time. I'm going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about some self-reflection that you may have done over these last 5 years about how you used to think about this. When the Ron Show returns on American One Radio and Progressive Voices. RonShowATL.com is the website where with each episode I give you show notes. I will include the link to the article that I'm speaking about today from the New York Times, mid-December, the story of Jaime Kachua and his wife Jennifer and their 4 children in Rome, Georgia. The problem is, for this family, that Jaime is a DACA recipient who came here when he was 10 months old, obviously didn't have a say in that, and now could be deported in the new Trump presidency. Jennifer, one thing that I was going to point out before we even started talking on the first segment here, we had a little conversation before we went on the air about how to pronounce his name. And I thought that was a pretty profound little moment in and of itself because I wasn't sure, is it Jamie or is it Jaime? And you pointed out that to those around him as he grew up, he wanted to not stand out as Hispanic as much as possible, and it was Jamie. But in recent years, and as long as you've known him, his name is Jaime, correct?
That's correct.
Talk to me about your coming into this relationship, someone who you said before was a Trump supporter, and do you feel any sense of I don't want to say guilt or shame or anything like that, but what does come up emotionally for you when you see this now from a different perspective than you had before you met Jaime and started dating and then married?
I guess right now I just feel a sense of sadness. It's not even really like a guilt or a shame
Mm-hmm.
because like at the time, like I felt very, proud of my morals. I thought I was believing in the right thing, right?
Yeah.
I thought I was
Yeah.
standing up for all things that were good because
Yeah.
that's how I was raised. And
Right.
but now that I know how complicated it is for people like my husband and just immigration in general, like I just feel so sad. I feel so sad that so many people don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and that so many people may not care to really understand or, they really believe that, these people are terrible or, like whatever beliefs they have. Like
Yeah.
I just, it breaks my heart, because I wish everybody knew, and I wish that I could go back and just tell my younger self, like, hey, do more research. Hey, learn about it more. Learn really how much the people around you are struggling. Because that's the thing is I feel like maybe I just lacked empathy. Maybe I lacked, and I don't think it was that I lacked empathy. I just lacked understanding. I
Yeah.
lacked the knowledge necessary. And I think that if I would have had more resources and more knowledge and more data on it, then I could have formed a more, I don't know, I guess sympathetic opinion of it,
Yeah, right. An informed opinion, and that's that's a large part of the problem that I see in our country and our society today. We have our partisan divides, not just politically, but even with who we choose to get our news from or sourcing, and whose names we trust and whose voices we trust in these scenarios. Have you taken this sort of understanding that you have now, this newfound understanding, to any other areas that come up in ideological debates? For example, I liken this in some respects like my former in-laws. They live in Cedartown, not far from where you are. And prior to knowing someone who is LGBTQ plus and then marrying someone else who is LGBTQ plus, they came away from that experience with a broader understanding than they had before. Have you carried that to other realms aside from just immigration?
Yeah, I didn't really grow up in a conservative manner when it comes to like, LGBTQIA or anything like that, or because like I have family that belongs to that demographic, and but like I definitely have as I've aged and as I've gotten older, like I have a broader acceptance and understanding of other people, and just like, and then too, even with my faith, like I am a Christian, I am a believer, but I am a believer in the fact that like I need to love everybody, like, and that's so like, yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways like I am more sympathetic, and this did help me grow as a person and, broaden that to other areas in my life. But like I think it's a hand in hand thing for me. It's not just this situation, but just growth in all areas,
Yeah.
because I think that's just how it happens in life anyways.
And I think in this past week or so, when we've been eulogizing former President Jimmy Carter, who was a devout Southern Baptist and Christian and lived that life, exemplified the teachings of Jesus in ways that I think a lot of the Southern evangelical Christian movement today sort of doesn't, really provides a stark contrast. So I find it pretty profound that you bring up your religion and how that hasn't been lost in this migration that you've had on a few subjects of social matters. We're on with Jennifer Kachua, who is the wife of Jaime Kachua, a DACA recipient who may wind up deported, leaving behind his wife and 4 kids. Pick up on this conversation when the Ron Show returns.
This is the Ron Show on America One Radio.
So it was December 15th. New York Times dropped a heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching piece centering around the plight of the Kachua family. Husband Jaime, wife Jennifer, and their 4 kids who face the prospect of the patriarch of that family, 33-year-old Jaime, being deported despite the fact that he has lived in the United States all but 10 months or so of his life and is surrounded in Rome, Georgia by friends and loved ones, coworkers, churchgoers, who almost all supported Donald Trump. Some aware, some unaware, the impact it might have on Jaime and his family. Jennifer, again, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. So, what's next? What options are there? I'm sure you guys are talking to an attorney or attorneys, and you're having conversations with immigration officials. What are the options?
So our options are that we can apply for what's called advanced parole, and that's where Jaime would have to submit paperwork stating like a valid reason for him to leave the country and submit that through USCIS and go through a waiting process that can be anywhere from 4 to 6 months, or you can do like an emergency advanced parole, but we have no reason that we can really think of because he doesn't have much family in Mexico, and we don't know if it's like an emergent enough situation with his family members down there to be able to apply for emergency advanced parole. So we're thinking we have to go like the standard advanced parole route, and that's, like I said, he has to submit a specific paperwork stating like, hey, this is my reason why I need to travel out of the country. That has to be either humanitarian, medical, or like educational purposes.
Hang on, let me ask a question. He has to leave the country for some, this sounds like he's going to have to leave the country one way or the other, and there's a reason he's submitting to be able to do that and then be able to come back?
Yeah, so the reason why is because if he doesn't do that and he just like left and came back, he would be barred from reentry.
But what I'm asking is, he can't just stay here and go through some sort of legal grievance?
No, not that we know of, or that we've been told of at least. You have to have legal entry into the country in order to ever have an adjustment of status. So that was what the whole like great thing about Biden's parole in place was that it was going to open the opportunity for people like my husband who have been here for more than 10 years and don't have any criminal history to be able to do it all from the States instead of having to leave. And we submitted, like I said, that article states like a packet documenting the whole past 10 years and showing proof that Jaime's been here consecutively. And like, we were really hoping on that. And when that got shot down, now our only options are that he can either go through the consular process, which is where he'd have to go out of the country for months and apply through the consulate in Mexico and spend thousands of dollars, and me have to sign a waiver asking for forgiveness for his unlawful presence time that he had between the time they turned 18 to the time that they released DACA, because he has accrued unlawful presence during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that bars him from like re-entry into the United States for so many years. Or we can do the advanced parole option, which is where he submits a paperwork and he states, hey, I need to leave the country for, like I said, medical, humanitarian, or educational purposes. He has to list what it is, have proof of all of that, and get approval. And then they give you like a time frame that says, hey, you can leave the country from this day to this day. Do not come back in late, or you will not get to come back in. And those are really our only options right now, to try to get him a legal entry. That way we can adjust his status. Because if we don't have that, we just can't adjust his status. We can never go through the process.
Are you speaking of the Remain in Mexico program? Is that what we revert back to? I'm trying to understand like why he has to leave the country, and is that the program you're speaking of?
I don't know that that's the program per se. But like I said, I do know that he can't like I said, because he was brought here technically on paper illegally as a baby, he has no lawful permit. Like he was never entered into the country lawfully, and he wasn't inspected. That's what it's called, a lawful inspection, I believe. And because of that, he can never adjust his status. So, yeah, like I said, he has to have that lawful entry and the inspection in order to ever be able to adjust his status as of right now. The only people that I think it's different for are like people who have military spouses or something like that. They can apply for parole in place. But otherwise, DACA recipients are able to do, like I said, the advanced parole and can go back to Mexico and then come back in, and they get inspected at the border or like through airports, through the airports, and are then stamped on a piece of paper, and then they take that piece of paper and they, the stamp in their passport, and they use that as proof that they were paroled into the country.
But are they allowed to pass go or collect $200? This sounds ridiculous. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Oh my God.
It's crazy.
Oh my God.
It is crazy.
So he can't even apply for like a work visa? I mean, he's working.
Well, so he does have, DACA does grant him the right to work, but it doesn't grant him, lawful presence.
Oh my God. This is so asinine.
Which, here's the other kicker. It does grant him lawful presence for tax purposes.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, my gosh. This is insane. Can I ask you what sort of, because you're like the middle person in this relationship. The article speaks a lot to your father, Sky. Again, a Trump supporter who I guess didn't really understand the magnitude of this until they sat down and had this conversation, your husband and your father, about what Trump's reelection means for his son-in-law and his daughter's family. What is the dynamic like in this relationship now?
We're still close. That's still my dad.
Yeah.
And I still love him dearly.
Right.
And, it's like I said, I can't be mad at him. And I'm not mad at people who don't know. I'm more angry at the people who, like, if I have any anger, I'm angry at the people who do know and don't care.
Preach. Preach.
And so, but those who just like really don't know, or who maybe don't understand, because like I said, they have never had the necessity to know. I'm not mad. Like I said, I feel more just brokenhearted.
Right.
Because I just wish that they deemed it necessary. Necessary information. But like I said, I've been in their shoes before. I've been in the place of like not really needing to know and just kind of being like, oh, I hear all the propaganda around me and that's what I believe, right? Instead of having those hard conversations like I initially did in the beginning of my relationship. And, so like I said, I'm not mad at my dad. I'm not angry with him, and I love him. I know that all of his reasons as to why he voted the way he did, he felt that they were necessary reasons.
Right.
And it's like he even said in his mind, he doesn't see Jaime as somebody who should be treated this way.
Right.
He doesn't see Jaime as a criminal, or
it's more personal. Yeah.
Yeah, and like he doesn't see Jaime as this criminal or this horrible person. And, I think there's a lot of people like my dad who can believe in the economic plans for Trump, and they think that he's great for all these reasons and that he's going to, strengthen our borders and make us more safe. And like they really feel this sense of like security with him. And I truly believe that a majority of them have good reasons.
Good intentions, right.
But yeah, they have good intentions. And I truly believe my dad falls into that category, right? And so I don't think that he would ever vote in a way that he thought would truly harm his family.
Or anyone, honestly. And that's
or
the thing.
Anyone.
Yeah, that's the thing that sort of angers me. And I talk about this a lot in past episodes about the manipulation by media choices that people make and are easily roped into. And in some respects, this comes from religion as well. In fact, there's, a good history that talks about how religious media became right-wing media in the advent of talk radio in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and when it became more, polarized and politicized. But that's the thing that gets me too. I grew up in a small town outside Augusta, Georgia. Attended a Baptist church most of my childhood. I understand. I'm not religious now, but I do understand that people who I know and love and who have good hearts and the best of intentions, I see them on social media saying things that are so vile and evil about other human beings, whether it be undocumented immigrants, whether it be Palestinians, and it just drives me mad because these are good people whose minds and hearts are being poisoned by disinformation, misinformation, or lies by omission, even. And in your case, here we see where it's personal, and the story or the mindset changes because it's personal. But yes, it's always personal. It's personal for somebody somewhere, which is where you bring up empathy, and
Yeah.
that's where empathy comes in.
Yeah, and that's my biggest thing is I just want people to understand. Like I want, you know, even the people who are believers, like we're called to be the hands and feet of Jesus and we're called to love others. Like
Yeah.
we have to step into the shoes of the other person and really understand what it's like to live their life. And we have to learn how to, respect them too and give them space to live and understand that like I can't push my beliefs onto everybody, and I just want to love people and I want people to love my people,
Yeah.
like love me, I love you. Like let's
Right.
all just like be nice and be empathetic of one another
Mm.
and understand that we all have just one life to live. Like this is just one life. And like why does it have to be so volatile and just so mean? Like it's not the life that I want to live,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I it just like I said, it breaks my heart all around. Like I just to see people filled with so much hate and so much just like I said, just horrible things that they say. And there's times where I'm just like, I want to question people. I'm like, is that really how you feel?
Yeah.
If that was your daughter or your husband or whoever that or your son or whatever in your life, like, would you still feel that way?
Yeah. So my last question for you is this: whatever the future holds for you and your family, does this make you more inclined to want to advocate for immigration reforms and empathy in our immigration process? Talk to me about what this has done for you as far as advocacy goes. Do you feel more inclined to advocate, or are you just so busy right now because this is so close, this is so personal, this affects you in so many ways that you're just doing all you can to keep your family afloat and survive this process?
I think it's a little bit of both. Like I'm doing everything I can to keep my family afloat and just to make it through this, but at the same time, like I I am okay with being the voice that helps propel some kind of reform, some kind of change. Like
Yeah.
if somebody can gain something from our story in a positive manner and be like, wow, this is crazy, this definitely needs to be addressed. Nobody should have to face this.
Mhm.
Then I'm okay with being that voice.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. It's kind of crazy because I never had the intentions that our story would be as big as what it is right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't what it was whenever, because I initially had posted a GoFundMe, and that's how Eli had ever found my story.
Oh.
And he messaged me, and all I was trying to do was just like, help pay for some of our lawyer fees because we got 4 kids, like
Yeah. Yeah.
we have 4 children, and like paying for lawyers and paying, 20 grand is a lot.
Yeah.
And for anybody, right? And that's how he found it. And so like my only initial like thing that I was trying to do was just trying to help my family out, right?
Sure.
And but when Eli messaged me, I was all for spreading the word,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not for our own benefit and our
Right.
own gain, but because I want more people to know
Mm-hmm.
how hard this is.
I'm sure. I'm
More
sure.
people to realize.
I'm sure outside of your bubble, you've probably warmed the hearts of those who are probably already aligned with your plight. Have you seen any change around you? Those who you may have thought at some point in time were hardened in this camp and now understand a little bit better. Have you seen a softening in your periphery, in your sphere of, friends, family, loved ones, churchgoers, your community?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the more people I've talked to about it,
Mm,
the more people I've witnessed that, you know, same thing like earlier I said, they're like, "Oh, well, it should be easy." And then I tell them how difficult it really is. And like, "Oh, that's not right."
right.
It shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
And even my own dad, whenever he's learned about how difficult this is, he's like, "It shouldn't be this complicated."
Right.
Right? He's like, "That's crazy." Somebody who's like a hardcore Trump supporter is even like, "That's crazy."
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like there's a lot of people, like I said, as soon as they've gained more knowledge and more understanding to the process, they've definitely become more softened to it.
Well, that's encouraging, and I encourage you to keep telling your story because it's a story that more Americans need to hear about. I want to thank you for giving me the time to discuss your situation as much as you can. And do me a favor and send me your GoFundMe link so I can include that in the show note as well at ronchoatl.com. What has the support been there for you? Are organizations stepping up to provide resources and encouragement?
Oh, it's amazing. Like we've had so many people reaching out to us that want to share our story. So many amazing people supporting our GoFundMe and like I mean that's exceeded what our initial donation like threshold was and it's been amazing because like we've been able to just like really feel secure in this like never have to like we're not having to really worry much like there's still potentials of like oh
Yeah.
will this meet all of our needs like will this meet all of it but like and now we're reaching a point where it's like hopefully we can turn around and give money back
Oh,
to
that's good.
people who are in need also like I see a lot of opportunities opening with this and I'm very very excited and I'm very hopeful. That's I think the best word for it. I'm hopeful that this is nothing but good things are going to come out of it.
Mhm.
And I'm so thankful for just the mass amount of support that we've had because it's been far beyond anything that we could ever begin to imagine. Um, but yeah, just all around the world, people have reached out
Wow.
to us and said something to us and people from all over the country have just poured out their love and support and stated how crazy they think it is. So we're just so blessed. I mean, really and truly, I fall back on my religion on this one. Like we are so, so blessed and so thankful that this is where God is positioning us into, like we are being propelled into something that I feel like is going to be very, very big.
Hmm.
And I'm ready to see what we are able to do, you know, what good things will come of this.
That's a powerful way to close the conversation. Jennifer Chua, wife of husband Jaime and those 4 children that I know you need to go take care of. Thank you so much for spending some time sharing your story with us today on The Ron Show. I do appreciate that so much.
Yes, you're very welcome, and I hope you have a wonderful day and wonderful weekend and stay warm.
Oh, yeah, you too. I know you guys are going to get it worse up there than we are. All right,
Oh,
be
yeah,
safe.
for sure. All
Bye-bye.
right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Final few minutes of today's Ron Show. Thank you for listening again. And as I always do, I'll give you the link to the article this very episode is all about in the show notes at ronchoatl.com. I want to focus in on Jennifer's father, Sky, a little bit. There's a piece in this article where it mentions he pulls into Jaime's cul-de-sac and carried his go bag. His go bag was like a survival gear pack, which he carried with him all over the place. Supplies that he thought he might need to be self-sufficient in a power outage or a societal collapse, like, tourniquets, binoculars, knives, whistles, flashlights, water filters, fire starters, a snake bite kit, a firearm, a slingshot, and a Bible. Anyway, I don't know why he carried this to visit, but he did. He was going to go babysit the grandkids, I guess. Nowhere could he sense the country's political tensions escalating like inside his own family. He shared a house with his father, but they hadn't spoken for 13 months, ever since his father accused Sky of being a radical foot soldier for Trump. His sister-in-law was transgender, but Sky refused to use new pronouns or change the way he talked because he said he, quote, didn't believe in that PC crap. His wife, a Democrat, had briefly considered moving out a few days after the election, accusing Sky of betraying their Hispanic grandchildren with his vote. And now he was navigating another divide with Jaime, whom Sky said he cared for like a son. Sky had been skeptical when Jennifer first introduced him to Jaime, worrying that she would complicate her life by marrying an undocumented immigrant. But Jaime had proven himself as a, quote, devout Christian, a great father, a model family man. Jaime handed his 1-year-old son to Sky and told him about his latest long-shot plan before Trump took office to travel back to Mexico, wait for paperwork, re-enter the U.S., and then apply for legal residency. He and Jennifer had an appointment with an immigration lawyer in Atlanta, and Jaime said they might need help with childcare, legal fees, and letters of support. It's stupid that they make it this hard for someone like you, Sky said. We agree, Jaime said. I know it might not always seem like it, but I've got your back, Sky said. I like Trump, but he's a blowhard. He's a salesman. He'll toughen things up on the border, but he's not actually coming after people like you. Nobody's putting you on a bus unless they get by me, Sky said. Okay. Later on, Jaime and Jennifer drove out of Rome past the MAGA souvenir stand and toward the suburban Atlanta law office of Uriel Delgado. They gave him Jennifer's binder of evidence, routine artifacts of a life in the United States, tax forms, school report cards, letters of support, car payments, mortgage documents, credit card bills. Super organized, Delgado said. It's cut and dry, a perfect case. So it's easy, Jaime asked. Delgado said, not exactly. He explained that Trump had equivocated over the years about how to treat DACA recipients, but now he was stocking his new administration with officials who were eager for mass deportations. Right now, in terms of how alarmed I am about the next 4 years, I'd say the situation is a 9 out of 10. He told them about some of his other clients in the last few weeks, the daily panic he witnessed in his office, the desperation, the devastation, when all he had to offer were consolations and dead ends. So yeah, he said, make that a 10 out of 10. Even an easy case just got very hard. Jennifer shared with us in our prior conversation on this show a lot of what needs to be done, and it's insane, right? Further on in this conversation with the attorney, Uriel Delgado, there's this exchange. Jaime and Jennifer gathered their paperwork, thanked him, and said they would seek out a loan and send over a deposit once they got back to Rome. Rome, huh? Delgado said. That's where I grew up, small town, real conservative. There's still a lot of that, Jaime said. Apparently, Delgado said. He told them about his parents, who immigrated from Mexico to Georgia as children, and later were given amnesty under President Ronald Reagan. They worked in menial jobs, saved and eventually managed to buy a building in the center of downtown Rome, where they opened a restaurant and a nightclub. It was a popular place, especially among the city's growing number of immigrants, but neighboring business owners kept creating new obstacles, challenging their liquor license, citing arcane building codes, filing noise complaints, and eventually resorting to outright racism by accusing Delgado's family of a far-fetched connection to a Mexican cartel. The Rome police kept showing up at the restaurant. The city council got involved. Eventually, his parents decided to close the business and follow Delgado to Atlanta, where he'd become a prominent immigration lawyer, in part so he would be able to defend his family if they suffered discrimination again. Every time I drive up that way, I still feel this anger, this thickness in the air, Delgado said. I get that, Jaime said. It's a complicated place. It's that small town-minded set, Delgado said. Yeah, but it's not all that bad, Jaime said. There's a lot of goodness underneath. Delgado questioned, you think so? Jaime's response, I hope so. And then he followed Jennifer to the car and started driving home. Just a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking story from the heart of Trump country, Marjorie Taylor Greene's congressional district in northwest Georgia. Real lives affected here, not just American citizens, but folks who have only known America as their home for as long as they can remember. So how do we go about triggering the empathy chip in some of the minds that are immobile on this issue? I don't know. I want to thank Jennifer Kachua for joining me today. Back here Monday, 9 a.m., 5 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Have yourselves a great weekend.